Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for having me here. I'm very excited. Thank you to Barry and all the sponsors and creating such a big effort to pulling all this together. I'm going to talk about our future in urban air mobility today. It's also known as advanced air mobility. And I'm planning to give a bit of an overview, the challenges that we've been looking at in the industry, and also how to best integrate it. I think this morning was very interesting, looking at different forms of smart transportation. I really enjoyed Ricky Leung's speech on the airport and what the ambitious plans are, and I think now it's a good follow-on to go from a big airport to a very small airport. Just to give a little bit of an overview, my background is in architecture, construction, and big infrastructure integration. I've been working over 20 years for Foster's, Richard Rogers, Nicholas Grimshaw, and then we moved on to create our group structure, which is called 6 Miles Across London. Our office is based in London, and we started looking at what will our future bring when we look at mobility, what is a more sustainable way, and how can we make sure that we move in the right direction. So we've got Urban Airport. I will be speaking about Urban Airport today, but we also have a company called Urban Mass, which looks at a fully electrical mass transportation system on demand, and we have a small foundation where we look at community projects and how can we bring sustainability into everybody's lives. We started looking at urban air mobility probably 7 years ago, which is a long time in that sector, and we started to focus both on cargo. So in the two right-hand corners, you see two options where we create little vertiports for cargo drones that can connect to fulfillment centers. And we've also started looking at 7 years ago at air taxis. So they're called eVTOLs, and how can we make sure that the right infrastructure is provided. So rather than just looking at a big airport which is compressed into a mini airport, does it need a new form of infrastructure? And then we started looking at options to say, okay, if we look at very dense areas, for example, like Hong Kong or any cosmopolitan cities like London, where we live, how can we make sure it's as compact as possible? So we will look at a very small carbon footprint. They can be accommodated on rooftops. So if we look at high-rise in big cities or on car park roofs, but also how can we look at offshore options for our vertiport infrastructure? So our mission is to better connect cities and to create kind of and accelerate our economic recovery. And on this image, you see our vertiport. So we call it the next gen. So we delivered the world's first fully vertiport last year in Coventry, and since then we have moved on to think, okay, how can we make it technically more safer for customers? How can we maximize customer journeys and customer experience? And how can we make sure, what does it really take to integrate intercities and to make sure it's really urban air mobility rather than just flights going from an airport to another airport? So we look at safe and seamless passenger experience, and we've also started looking at energy solutions. So what you see here is that we've got a vertical airfield in the center of our vertiports, and then that descends. So it's almost an aircraft carrier on shore. When we talked to the FAA, they said, oh yeah, we understand what you're trying to do. And then you have the air taxis are being tugged into hangars. So we started to stack them to be more efficient. So rather than going horizontal, we go vertical to keep it very compact. But which also means we have a controlled environment. eVTOLs are very sensitive. It's all about maintaining and prolonging battery lifespan. So compared to an EV car, which has a battery lifespan probably of 10 to 20 years, eVTOLs, every 3 to 6 months, they will have to replace their batteries. So it's essentially a flying battery. It's very expensive, but also then sustainability comes into play. How can we make sure that fast charging is provided on site, but how can we look at greener forms of energy? This is our delivery of the world's first fully operational vertiport in Coventry. So we won a 1.2 million grant from the Research and Innovation Department by the UK government. And then this was match funded by Supernal. Supernal is the urban air mobility division of Hyundai Motor Group. So they came in as our match funder. They then became our investor and are now our client. So we work closely with them. You see, this is Coventry city centre. On the right-hand side, where the red building is, it's a multi-story car park and the main train station. And then when you look kind of into the city, it's the city centre and surrounded by high-rise buildings. So for us, it was very important to locate the world's first vertiport in a very central location, because it is all about intermodal connectivity. What is a very quick connect time for people taking the train? So people don't want more than probably 2 to 5 minutes connect time. And then we also showcase this as an off-grid solution, so looking at energy solutions. We had 2 hydrogen fuel cells on site, making it an off-grid solution and showing how EV cars and how do other forms of revenue from a non-aeronautical perspective can be integrated. We conducted 150 cargo drone flights. So we worked very closely with the Civil Aviation Authority in the UK. We worked with the police, which was very interesting. So they showed us, they used their drones, as you can see here, the West Midlands Police, and to showcase how safety can be brought into by using drones. We had an integrated command and control center, and we had 15,000 visitors. So this is our technology. So it's IP protected. We have 10 different patent families. On the left, you see what we call the vertical airfield. So essentially, we are taking a traditional horizontal airfield, like we've seen earlier on from an airport perspective, and we're compacting it and stacking it vertically. So that means air taxis, they land and take off at height, and then they're lowered down when they're in off mode, which makes it safer, and there's less noise pollution. And we create a controlled environment around that central vertical airfield. On the right-hand side, you see Supernal's air taxi. So they've been developing it. This is called the SA1, and the next gen will be officially launched, I think, at CES early next year in Las Vegas. And this shows, this is one of my favorite photos. So it's the vertical airfield in the middle. It's compliant with FAA. In this case, we complied with EASA guidelines, so the regulatory bodies. And then the air taxi would then be centered and tucked into the center, and then it goes up and takes off. But in this case, in Coventry, because no air taxis have certified yet, we showcased cargo drones. What is this industry about? I think there are many challenges. Lots of money has gone into the development of eVTOLs, so they call it the race to certification. So you might be familiar, EHang in China, they just managed to certify. We have Volocopter in Germany, and then there's Joby and Archer in the US and Vertical Airspace in the UK. But what the industry tends to forget is, it's not only an airspace challenge, it's an urban planning challenge. And I think that's what we're talking about today. How do we really make sure that these new forms of mobility can be integrated? How do we make sure that the public actually benefits? So it's not just a VIP service. I think there's been lots of kind of challenges from the public, because they say, well, can we afford it if the ticket is $200? And what benefit does it give it to me? And is there something else? So what we showcased in Coventry was really to say, it is about public perception and acceptance, and how can we add other services to it rather than just the flight itself. And I think from a commercial perspective, most airports make most money not of ticket sales, but of non-aeronautical revenue. And it also helps people then to get excited. So we showcased, okay, so an F&B perspective, we had private dining events, we had big talk shows, and then up there you see people when the vertical airfield went up and down, and I think we did that very successfully, creating networking events and looking at STEM and working with the university to say, okay, our next generation of pilots, where do they start? How can they start getting interested in advanced air mobility? This was a photo taken on the launch day, and we think it brought together this ecosystem. So the industry talks a lot about the importance of the ecosystem. So OEMs have to work closely with infrastructure providers. We have to work together with regulatory bodies, but also the public. So here we have the UK government there. We had a local council, which is important from a planning perspective. And then you see Supernal, and this is Mike Whitaker, the tour guy. He's now he has moved from Supernal to become the new administrator. Some people might have heard of him, and of the FAA. So it's a very big deal, and I think the industry is very excited because they think that Mike Whitaker will now bring a kind of a new era and try and push advanced air mobility forward as part of the head of the FAA. If we look at the start of this new industry, so what will happen next July is an important kind of milestone for the industry. Volocopter, the German company, will fly for the first time beginning of commercial routes in line with the Paris Olympics. So they have selected 5 routes, and they have started to look at existing infrastructure first. So what can they utilize? Airports are, of course, a big client for eVTOL services, because they can then connect to long-haul flights, for example. They will fly to either heliports. As you can see here, Les Moulins, it's close actually to the Eiffel Tower, and then they have a normal airport, so non-commercial, in Le Bourget, and these are the 5 routes that Volocopter is targeting, and then they're saying they would do 2 flights per hour, so they will start testing commercial operations as of next July. And then if we look to the US, which is a big player in advanced air mobility, you have Joby and Archer, and they have been looking at Blade's helicopter route, so taking off from Newark and from JFK, and then getting into Manhattan and using the existing heliport. Some of you might know it. It's a jetty in the center of Manhattan, and they will land there. And then we look at what is the competitive landscape and what are the challenges. So if we look at a more conventional approach, which most industry players are doing, they are looking at a conventional airport model where you need a lot of space, so it's a lot of tarmac. You have a big terminal building, and this is what the industry is trying to scale up. And this is where we come in, and we said we don't really think that this is a model that can be scaled up. It needs a new form of infrastructure, but especially if we look at dense urbanities, which is kind of the main market for urban air mobility, there's a lack of space. So yesterday we talked about the costs of real estate. I know in Hong Kong they're very high. We've been talking a lot to the Middle East, so Dubai has had a building boom. It's very expensive, and also space is not available. That's why we think that a traditional, conventional approach is not really the right solution. So what we are saying is we will start at airports, because these are this is the immediate need, and then we have to look at how do we really get into city centers, how do we get into places where people really want to go, rather than saying we are confined and restricted to lots of real estate, to lots of land, which is very costly. And then here we have we've been working with a famous aerodynamicist, and he's been looking at specifically at the impacts of downwash and outwash by VTOLs. So that's a big challenge in the industry because it's different to a helicopter downwash. And then we're looking at how can we provide a very safe environment, because rather than boarding and deboarding outside on tarmac, we do everything in a controlled environment. Space is a big challenge, like we just talked about. So our vertiports, because they can be vertically stacked, so we're compressing everything into it's almost like a tower rather than traditional, like a bungalow building, if you compare it, is 80% smaller than a conventional model. So on the right-hand side, you see everything laid out in the examples I showed to you earlier on, is what the industry is looking at in general. And then on the left, we have our vertically stacked vertical airfield, but also hangars are stacked. And then this is an image of what our 8-hanger stacked vertiport looks like. We think it's important to look at a modular system. So how can we make sure that we provide a scalable solution? The industry is developing very slowly. There are lots of challenges. Lots of money has gone into eVTOL funding, but nobody has really looked and funded infrastructure. So there's a lack of kind of all the other components that are not ready yet, even if eVTOLs will certify as of next year. And we are saying is what we offer to our clients is you can start small, so you can start with one vertical airfield and have 2 hangars, maybe double stacked, which gives you 10 flights per hour. So the industry is targeting anywhere between 10 and 15 flights per hour to make it commercially viable. And then we say you can go up, and depending on fast forwarding 5-10 years time, if networks have been established, routes have been validated to be commercially successful, you can almost, you can then look at our large, and that is like a dual runway. So we have 2 vertical airfields, and then you can double operations. Another challenge is the energy, what we call the energy challenge. So most sites don't provide enough power from the local grid to support vertiport operations. So eVTOLs need to be fast charged. They have very big batteries, and they are very power hungry. So what we said is, okay, what is the other thing that we need to look at? So not only charging, because that needs to be provided on site, but also how can we look at more efficient energy storage units that basically use batteries to store on site. You can then do smart storing overnight, and then release the additional energy that is required during the day. This is the vertiport in Coventry, where we showcased the off-site hydrogen fuel cells, and then we're showing the multimodal charging aspect of it and charging of eVTOLs inside the vertiport. A little bit about our team. So we have a great team. Most of us have construction, architecture, working on big infrastructure projects. We work very closely with Supernal, so they're developing their own OEM, and these are some of our projects. So we believe that having had experience in delivering very iconic big infrastructure projects, so most of us worked on Beijing Airport, Heathrow T5, I led Battersea Power Station, Mazda City from a sustainability perspective, Doha Airport, so we lived 2 years in Doha and worked in the Middle East. Some of us worked on HS2. GridServe in the UK was the first EV charging hub, and big master plans like Slussen. And I think all this kind of knowledge of how to integrate different forms of transportation and looking at big regeneration projects, that gives us the ability to understand what will our future bring, what will be required to think of a new form of infrastructure, and then to make sure that that will be integrated in different environments. Our board of advisors, yeah, we are a startup, so our team is quite small. So we rely heavily on our board of advisors, and we're very fortunate that, I guess, over the last 20 years, we have made many connections, which were then happy to join us on our journey now. So it ranges from different city councils to NATS, to head of drone operations in our team. We've got special projects, so they worked on the Wembley roof, and they helped us a lot with the vertical airfield, so any kind of moving structures. People from Airbus and Arab, British Aviation Group, and Qatar Airways, so when we worked in the Middle East. There's a commercial challenge. I thought that might be interesting for today. Many people, I think, wonder how is that whole service going to work. Ticket prices are very expensive. Landing fees will be expensive, and there's a big question in the industry, but who's going to operate it? There is no such thing as an eVTOL operator because it's a completely new industry. So the likelihood is that airports will become operators. There might be third parties that will become operators, and then you've got the OEMs that are going to operate the eVTOLs themselves, but who looks after ground operations? We said one way of looking at it is to say, okay, if you, who does the infrastructure? You know, how can it be commercially viable? How do you put that into a commercial model? So strategic advisory is a big role. We've been talking to different airports in America and in Japan. So they would like to know, okay, how can we start thinking about integrating a vertiport at our airport? You know, what do we need to look out for? Does it sit landside? Does it sit airside? Do we connect it with airlines such as Delta, American Airline, or is it a completely separate service? Operations, I think, are important. Revenue sharing, so the importance of non-aeronautical. So what else can a vertiport offer? Is it F&B? Is there lots of e-commerce? Do we look at retail? Is it intermodal connectivity? And then there's a subscription fee for each vertiport infrastructure sale. And then how do we start? I think that's the big question. Nobody really knows should they go ahead and build a vertiport, but nobody has started flying yet. Should they look at existing facilities? But how do you get sites ready? Because we know that infrastructure doesn't just work from one day to the next. So what we have started doing is to say, okay, communities or local councils can start with public acceptance. So how do you get people on board and understand what the, I guess, concerns are? How do you talk to local governments? So we've been talking to TfL in London, for example, plus CAA, regulatory bodies. What are the concerns from an urban, from kind of an air challenge, but what are the issues that we look at when we talk about urban planning? And then I think it's a transitioning. So to start small, and then in line with a maturing market to then say, okay, we start off with an EV charging hub, so we get the energy that is required in place, and then there will be transitioning maybe to cargo drone deliveries. So cargo drone deliveries have started. So there's Mana Drone in Ireland, so they do commercial operations. I know there's Meituan in Shenzhen. They're quite successful when it comes to commercializing retail services and cargo being delivered. And then there will be a transitioning to air taxi services. Yep, and this is just a group photo that we had that was taken in Coventry last year. And I think it's always important, we always say, it's important to work as a team. It's a big industry. So we've been putting lots of emphasis on working with governments, with regulatory bodies, with OEMs, trying to push this forward. And I think the first kind of vertiport integration cases are happening. So I think the industry is slowly moving forward. But I think there's still a long way to go. But I think this morning was very interesting. I think Hong Kong lends itself to eVTOL operations, I think from a geographical setup, and I think what Ricky Leung talked about today, trying to kind of unify and provide better connectivity with the Greater Bay Area. I think there is a big market, and I think it's exciting times to see what the future of Hong Kong will bring. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Wu. Thank you very much. Please be seated. Thank you.